Even if your husband goes off and works a 9 to 5 job and you're working somewhere else 9 to 5, you can somehow connect that as far as talking about your goals, talking about your desires or something that's lacking.
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastriani, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mastriani. Today, I'm really excited to have with me Julia Barbaro. Julia is a homeschooling mom of 6 wonderful children, a wife, certified life coach, and marriage coach. She's an integral part of the behind-the-scenes operations of her husband Gino's business ventures, including Jake and Gino and the Rand family of companies. Julia was inspired to become a certified life and marriage coach after witnessing the power of coaching. She felt compelled to give back and motivate others to set goals, seek out their soul purpose, and ask what's next in their life. Julia's passion is to empower couples to strengthen their mind, their communication, overcome obstacles, and seek clarity. Together, she helps them to create a life plan for themselves, as well as encouraging parents to guide their children through adulthood. Julia is also the author of The Cannolis Exploded and A Gelato Blast, children's books about decision-making and different paths we can take in life. Julia and her family live in St. Augustine, Florida, where she enjoys the old city and the simple beach life. Julia Barbaro, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Bob, for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, great. So you and I had a great conversation. I guess about a month ago, we were together in Jacksonville, Florida for one of the Jake and Gino events. And I just thought, man, I would love to be able to have you come on and talk a little bit about, if we could continue this conversation a little bit and sort of, bring some of the value that you provide onto any of my listeners. So I guess, if we could sort of jump right into what inspired you really to become a life coach, a marriage coach. I see you providing so much value to couples. I know, you and your wife, I'm sorry, you and your husband, Dino,
I won't tell him you said that.
Have a podcast, and you talk about helping couples, and I know that that's become a passion of yours. So maybe you could talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. It wasn't always like that. I have to tell you that because it's important for others to know that I grew up single. My mom was single. We had a good life, but it was hard for her. But there was always one thing that I, for some reason, craved, was that married life. I wanted to be married. I wanted to stay home. And I strived for that. I did. And it's a lot of work. We all know that just being married is in and of itself a lot of effort you have to put into having family. Like you said, we have 6 children. And I lived that life for quite some time, 20 years. And I loved it, but I was very painfully shy. And I never, ever in my wildest dreams would ever think I'd be on a podcast or on a stage speaking about this subject. I always loved it. I always strived for it. I always watched other couples. I always knew what to do, what not to do. But it was the moment where someone asked me in the Jake and Gino community was, well, how do you do what you do? And I said, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, Gino's here. He's successful. You all come, your children come, you all help him. You homeschool, you do all these things. You seem like you have a healthy marriage. How do you do that? I'm like, gosh, I don't really know. Like, well, we want to know. We want an understanding. We want you to guide us. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't know how to speak to people in that sense. I don't know how to explain what I do. And at the same time, my husband was going to life coach school. He became a life coach himself. And Bob, I have to tell you, I thought it was kind of kooky, the life coach thing. I thought it was kind of weird. I did make fun of him for it, but I did see progress in him, and I saw progress in other people, and I saw him change people's lives in just one conversation. And I thought, gosh, I kind of want that. And so I had to overcome many fears of public speaking, of talking to other people. I found something online that fit with my schedule. I took this course to be a life coach certified. And wow, I just, to give back to other people and to learn how to speak to them, to learn how to communicate better, how to listen better, how to even understand what I do, how I do what I do. That it does take something to do that. We don't, a lot of us just are busy all day and we don't really pay attention. So that awareness all came from me becoming a life coach. And now I can share with others and give back, because I so desire other people to have a good marriage, to have a healthy family. And so this is the way.
Well, that's great. That's great. And I want you to know that as someone who's a part of the Jake and Gino community, and talking to people behind the scenes, talking to other students, and you really do make a difference, and it's noticed by so many in the community, and so many are really grateful for the contributions that you make. So I just want you to know that, because
thank you.
that truly
I really
exists.
appreciate that. I really do. That means a lot.
Yeah. And, we spoke a bit before we started, we spoke about, parenting and sort of background. And, I will tell you that for me personally, when I was looking for mentorship, when I was looking for a program to help me with my real estate investing career, I also was looking for a community. And one of the big decision-making factors for me was, I went to Multifamily Mastery 4, and I wanted to see if the Jake and Gino community was what I had heard it was. And just seeing the participation of your family, your children are there, they're all working, they're all contributing, and knowing that, the family values were so important. I mean, it lives in the community. And I think, from yourself, from Gino, and from Jake and his family, and it really exists throughout the entire community. And it's just very clear that it's genuine, and to see that you genuinely care about helping family lives. I mean, you run a group for the women of the Jake and Gino community, where, I've heard so many times, speaking with women who are in the community, they say, oh, Julia runs such a great program with the women of Jake and Gino. And, we hardly ever talk about real estate, right?
We never talk. I'm like, that's my rule. I'm like, listen, this is personal. We want to talk about real estate once in a while, go for it. But for the most part, it's personal development, because that's what we're all craving, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. So, so some advice, I guess. So could you give a little bit of advice? One of the things that I think many are focusing on, it's the beginning of a new year. It's the beginning of, people are goal planning. And one of the eye-opening messages to me, sort of end of last year and into the beginning of this year, was I had a conversation with someone who I respect. And he said to me, the big change in my goals for 2023 are that when I created my goals in 2022, I hadn't even considered discussing them with my wife. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't even considered that they play a part in her life too. So I guess maybe if we could talk just a little bit about, as we're goal planning, for those of us who are married, for those of us who do have families, what are some ways that we can focus on making sure that we continue to keep the family a priority in the goals?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have to tell you that I'm really happy that you asked that. A lot of times what I've seen is, and my husband and I have gone through this as well, when he had the restaurant, where he would go to work, he would focus on what he was doing. I would be at home focusing on where I was. He would come home, and there was just like a disconnect. We weren't really on the same page. We weren't really talking about values. We didn't even know what they were at the time. And so we just went along. And when I look back, I'm like, wow, we were really missing out on so much. And it's what you're talking about, is talking about your goals together, even if you're not in it together. I don't know much about real estate, but somehow I'm working with Gino. And how is that? Because there's so much more to any company. Even if your husband goes off and works a 9-to-5 job and you're working somewhere else 9-to-5, you can somehow connect that, as far as talking about your goals, talking about your desires, or something that's lacking. When we come home, I always tell everyone, you can have a super successful business and come home and just be lost. you come home and the family's all doing their own thing. Your wife is off somewhere else, your husband. And that's the part that sometimes we put off because we're so busy trying to get our career, ahead, or trying to make more money. And those usually are our goals, is the money part. And so I just encourage everyone out there to focus on the family for a second. Focus what happens when you come home. Maybe you're out all day, you come home to the house. What does the house feel like? Is it a positive place to come to? And if it's not, it's never ever too late to work on the family, to work on your relationship with your spouse. And this is a great start. Hey, I want to share with you my goals. That's a great question that we can ask each other. And just, my husband very well. He has very different goals than I do. They're 100% different. But yet we come together and we talk about them. And he knows mine are very different. And he, as little as he thinks they are, he's like, that's great. I'm really proud of you. Like stuff like that. So it's never too late to start that.
Yeah. And for me, I probably could sit down and write goals that align with Gino's.
100%. That's why when you mentioned the women will bear profits, we met earlier today, and wow, was it a deep conversation, nothing to do with business. It started off about working, and somehow it got into the self-doubt, like our self-doubt on making decisions, and, even being a woman, and, you have children and you're trying to work at the same time. But a lot of times it's not really about the business. It's about your own personal mindset, your thought process, what's going on. That's sometimes what we have to really dig and focus on, because that sometimes is what's holding us back at work.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit earlier, you mentioned sort of living your values, and, another big thing that I guess was a little bit of an aha moment for my wife, Shannon, and I in the last 2 years. I think, one of the things that we speak about in the community and just throughout is finding your own personal core values, right? And it's been eye-opening to me, because you hear core values and you think of some big corporate culture. You think of a sign in the lobby that has 5 words on it that are probably disjointed anyway. And you don't think of your personal core values. And I think it's very interesting that we have spent a bit of time trying to really hone in on what our core values are. And then question number 2, am I living my core values? And am I doing the things that help me to move towards my core values and to focus on my core values? And I just thought, knowing enough about you and about, your mission, I think this is something that you probably could speak to and maybe give some advice about just sort of how to figure out and fine tune what your core values are.
Yeah, another great one. The values are so important. And that's why I have to tell you, early on, we didn't have values. We didn't know what they were until I went to the School of Life Coaching, and they asked me, and I'm like, I have no idea what that means, because like you said, it was for the businesses to hang up in their lobby. And I always thought that was nonsense anyway. They just have to write something that sounds good. And why, you know what I mean? It didn't apply to us at home. And I was like, my gosh, I don't know. What do I value? And I really had to sit. It took me a long time to figure that out. I even Googled it. I searched it. I'm like, oh, let me read all these values. What do I hold like to the highest? And I was like, all right, obviously God, to me, we've talked about this, is my number one. Am I actually living according to that? Because that's a big deal. And I thought, no, there are days where maybe I went throughout that not praying or whatever it is. And I said, okay, what am I going to do about that? So I came up with a plan. I put it on my schedule, what I was going to do. Now I know this sounds simple to some of you, but I do laundry, and I pray during doing the laundry, do the dishes, whatever it is. I actually have it scheduled. I've had it scheduled for a while, so I got into the habit of it. My family was next. Okay, so how am I living according to that value, as putting my family ahead of, let's say, my friends or my activities, or even the kids' activities, because sometimes we get so preoccupied with, gymnastics and jujitsu and all these other music courses, and all these courses we're running around. And I'm like, but we're not really spending time together. We're like literally running through and I said, okay, let's look at this. And I sat with the kids. I'm like, are there anything on here that you actually don't want to do anymore? Do you feel obligated to do all these sports or all these activities? And they're like, you know what, we got rid of a couple things and we spent more time at home. We spent more time cooking together.
Hmm.
That was a big deal. And then marriage, is one of my big values. Okay, what am I lacking in my marriage? That was a big one, because that one sometimes, especially when you have children or a successful company, you do put that kind of on the back burner. Your husband's there, your spouse is there. We can work on that later. And you keep putting it off and you're like,
Yeah.
gosh, that's actually not a good idea. So what's lacking in that? And
Hmm.
so slowly I had to figure out, okay, make some time. So Gino and I, we have a scheduled, which I hate to say it, but it's a scheduled date because otherwise we don't go. We
Hmm.
forget. We do spend some time on Sunday talking about the week. What are we going to, the plan for the week? He calls it an L10. We do have that because we have to work on it, because that's one of my values is marriage. If there's something not going right, I have to focus. Okay, what's not going right? Maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had and I keep putting it off. I just approach. I'm like, listen, we got to talk about this. So all those things that we are afraid to talk about or say or do, that's the moment where I'm like, all right, I have to put this first. If this is truly my value, am I living according? If it's a no, my gosh, we have to take a step, even if it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
even because that's important to us.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, for us, we've spent a bit of time sort of removing the things in our life that do not necessarily align with what we've found to be our core values. So, right, that's sort of step one, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Create that space. And I think a great goal for us for this year is to now embellish the things that do. And that's a great piece of information. That's great about sort of scheduling it and goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I don't have 6 children. I have one child. I have one child who
Hey, we had one first. We had
yeah.
one. So I do know.
But
Yes.
yes, and I could absolutely see where getting to certain events or getting to lessons and getting
Mm-hmm.
to certain things starts to take control sometimes, and then possibly your relationship could become back
Sure.
burner. And
Yeah.
so how could we enhance that and make it better? That's
And
great.
another thing too, Bob, which we forget, especially as we grow a little bit in this personal development, we were talking about that earlier, and our children are watching us, and we are the ultimate example for our kids. And we always teach the kids, to be kind to others and all this stuff. And then we realize, oh my gosh, we have people coming over to our house. Maybe they're friends from years ago and, they don't live the best of lives. Maybe they're a really bad example. And yet we're allowing that. We're allowing our kids to see us hang out with the wrong people, I guess I
Mhm.
should say. But meanwhile, we're teaching them something different. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times we really do have to pay attention to our lifestyle. What are we doing? Who are we listening to? What are we watching? All of that stuff, because it doesn't matter what we teach our kids. It's what we do.
Mhm.
They are learning from what we do. So if we're trying to lead the example, we really have to focus on our values and are we living according to them and what needs to change, and just change it. I mean, I a lot of times it's like, oh, I can't really do. I'm like, of course you can. Just take a step and do it. Be courageous.
So I have to tell you, one of the things that I saw from you in when we were together in Jacksonville, and I don't think
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to tell you this. So, um, you and Gino spoke in front of the room, and you spoke about you do a very good job, both of you, of speaking candidly about your personal life, your home life, and your children. And you spoke for probably close to an hour. We took a session break, and 4 of your girls were there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when we walked out of the room, I remember you walked out of the room, and it seemed like at the same time, all 4 of them had something that they wanted to talk to you about. Right? It was mom, 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 mom. But to watch your reaction was so impressive to me, because you instantly realized that, okay, my children want or need my attention at this point. And then I specifically recall that you sort of squatted down so that you were on the same level, same eye level as your child that was speaking to you. I don't remember which one it was, but one of your children was speaking to you, and you sort of brought yourself to that level. And I don't think there's another person who could have walked by or said anything to break your attention from your focus on, okay, right now I'm in this moment with my child and this is what's important. And that was a pretty good lesson for me, because it's now been more front of mind of, okay, when I'm with my daughter, am I present? Am I doing the things to make sure that she understands that what she just said to me is important to me? And it's so easy to become distracted, and you just, I was very impressed by the way you handled that situation, and I could tell that that's probably a big part of your life and an important part of your life. So it was a good lesson.
Thank you for noting. That's actually a big deal. I appreciate that you told me that, because a lot of times we don't say stuff like that and it passes. So now I have that memory also. So I really appreciate, Bob, that you said that. That's probably one of the hardest things as a parent, because we're so busy all the time. There's so much stuff going on. And sometimes our kids need us. And I tell people this sometimes, we homeschooled, we have 6 children. Yes, there's a lot of people always at home. And there's been times where my little guys have been like, Mom, I just want to spend time with you. I'm like, oh my God, I'm home all the time with you. I'm like literally sitting next to you. You're right next to me all day. And it took me years and years to realize that it wasn't being home. It wasn't being next to them. It's like you're parallel living, they just wanted exactly what you just said. They just want your focus. And a lot of times, even if the kids, I realized, because I paid attention to this, I could be in the room with them all day long and never have focused on them the whole day, because we're just so busy. We're doing things. Even if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're just busy doing stuff. And so that's where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to take care of this, because time is going by and I'm missing out on so many opportunities, but so are they. They're missing out on their mother. And so I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? And so at least once a day, when the kids come to me, one by one, just like you said, I literally have to stop everything and just look at them, stare at them, get to their level. And it takes a lot of effort when you're not used to it. It actually is very exhausting mentally. But over time, you become used to it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow, I'm so thankful I did this, because like I said, we could find everything to do all day long. We could find busy work all day and miss out on so many opportunities. So I just encourage you. I mean, whether it's a child, a mother, a parent, whoever, anybody in your life that you love and care about, take one moment every day. And just when they come to you, know that they're coming for not just to ask you a question, but they're looking for relationship. They're looking for attention, for love. And we also need that. And so we also get it from that child too in that moment. But we just let those moments slip by all day long. It's like,
Yeah.
And of course I mess up many days.
Well,
of course, what I
we're
mean?
human.
Yes.
But yeah, my initial thought as I walked by, and it was break time at a conference type thing, right? Everybody's rushing to get to the bathroom or to get a drink of water or something. And my initial thought was, wow, there's nothing that anyone else could say right now to break her focus. And it was just very impressive to me.
Thank you. Oh, it's so beautiful. I actually have that picture in my head, like I said, and I'll remember that the next time my kids come to me. And I think that's why it's good to talk about stuff like this, because we're not aware of things sometimes. We don't pay attention. And like I said, life goes by, your kids get older or your parents get older. It's just, we forget that these moments are so important.
Yeah. So I want to transition over, because this is the Healthy Investor Podcast. And I want to talk to you about sort of healthy habits. I like to ask, what sort of healthy habits or routines are a big part of your life and a big part of your day?
I love your podcast name, Healthy Investments. If you have an investment in yourself, in your marriage, in everywhere. So I do love the name of your show. As a mom, obviously, Italian husband who is a chef, food is the number one healthy lifestyle that we have. And it's interesting because there's 8 of us. It's a lot of cooking. It's a lot of food. But I have to tell you that is the number one thing that I put my priority in when it comes to being healthy, because there's a lot of easy outs. There's a lot of quick meals if we want to. And of course, there are times where we cheat. We have unhealthy meals. Let's be honest. But that's one thing that I know is a lot of work. I know there's a lot of cleanup. I know it's a lot of, the cost is high, but that's the one thing that I'm really serious about when it comes to keeping my family healthy. I feel like I have the obligation as the mother to provide healthy foods to my children. And there's a lot of times where and they appreciate it. And I've seen, them enjoy the food. There's so much more behind the cooking.
Yeah.
Cooking is just, there's so much there because you can get healthy relationships by cooking together. You get conversations that you would never have had if you weren't cooking together. So I always bring the kids in and we cook together. Even eating together, there's something about that alone that creates this healthy habit as far as relationship goes, conversation, digestion, all of that goes with sitting down and eating together. And then the cleanup. I mean, it's acts of service that you're also teaching your children, which is part of the healthy environment. And so food is the number one health. When I think about, when you ask me that question, that's the one thing that I think about. Now, exercise is another thing.
Sure.
That's, I'm still trying to figure that out. But the food, to me.
Well, I love that you took the approach of food, because it truly is, first of all, it truly is with what fuels us.
Right.
And, every fitness coach in the world will tell you that there's no workout routine that is going to beat a bad diet.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the interesting things, so when I first decided to do this podcast, we spoke about this before, and you have a little bit of background, and I do some triathlons and
Mm-hmm.
I train for those sort of things. And I think when I first started to plan this podcast, I sat down and started writing down the names of people and my first level thinking was, okay, who do I know that exercises?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden that turned into, okay, I know some people who compete in Ironman competitions and run, long distance races. And then, oh, well, this person does some really great things in the mental health
Mm-hmm.
part of their life. And then all of a sudden it started to really evolve into so many other facets of life. And I just love that you brought food into it, because, similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I told Gino once before, he's an Italian guy from New York. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
Italian guy from Philly.
Mm-hmm.
We're not very different. Our environment's not very different. And so food is a big part of our life too. So are there any special meals or meal types that you prefer to stick to, or is there anything that you have a main focus on?
So we obviously started Italian. Everything was Italian. And then as the kids grew, they're like, Mom, can we find some other stuff? And so now we make Asian, we make Indian, every cuisine we make. My kids are good about finding new recipes online, because there are so many healthy vegetables, tomatoes, all of that. There's so many healthy things to make. Get spices. We just came back from Italy this past summer, and L'Aquila, they have so many great spices that we brought home. And so it's that experiment that you could do with your children to try new things. Michael, we have one son, Michael. He's 20 years old, and he just got into, I know it's not healthy, but making fresh pasta. But we got the 00 flour from Italy. So it's not so bad. So it's just, everyone has their, and that's another thing about being the mother. A lot of times we're very controlling. Oh no, you got to do it this way. You got to try it this way in the kitchen. And I encourage everyone, especially, and even if it's your husband cooking in the kitchen, let go of that control, because when you do, you watch your children learn things that they never would have if you were on top of them teaching you how to do everything. So I let the kids make mistakes. I let them make things a couple times, and the third time it comes out amazing. But it really, as the mom, it's that healthy, again, we're going to use that word, relationship that you're creating with them. That if you just walk away and have the conversation and let them do the work, all of a sudden they're trying new things that you never would have thought, and it comes out incredible. But I'm just going to say, honestly, every cuisine has really healthy food.
Yeah.
And we found it. In our house, there's always something's being cooked all the time in our home.
That's great.
Yeah.
And again, I love that you're focusing, you sort of shed light on the idea that, you don't have to take one specific direction. There's so many healthy options, right? You can add vegetables to any cuisine, right?
Exactly.
If I wanted to go have Chinese food right now, I could find healthy options.
Absolutely.
And I can also find the deep fried greasy
Exactly. Thank you. I mean, we get the organic chicken or the beef, and we get, the organic soy sauce with no wheat in it. I mean, we go all out, get
Oh,
fresh
wow.
ginger. I mean, all the fresh vegetables you can find. We make a nice stir fry, and it's delicious.
Yeah.
I mean, the kids, they eat really well. I'm going to be honest.
Excellent.
But the trick is to have them cook it. And if you're in an environment where you can grow the vegetables, even better. If you can grow spices, a lot of people I know, my kids don't eat vegetables, they don't eat all this. I'm like, have them grow it. You'd be surprised what kids will eat if they grow it and cook it. They'll eat anything because they just didn't experience it. When you're handed something or when you make something, it's very different.
That's interesting. Before we move on to the final questions, I wanted to speak just a little bit about your books, your children's books, because one of my passions, I think, is that we, as a society, I don't think we do a good enough job at educating our children on some different life decisions, right? We don't talk to them about money. We don't talk to them about success, and we don't talk to them about mentorship and coaching. And there are so many things that I think we just don't talk to our children about until we feel, I'm putting air quotes up for those who are just listening, until we feel that they're at the quote unquote right age.
Right.
And then sometimes that's a little late in the game, right? If you're waiting until your child graduates college and gets their first job to start talking to them about how to handle the money that's coming in every couple of weeks, then they're going to have a tough time. So I like that your books have really good lessons, but they're also they're a good simple read for younger age children. And then for me, I can tell you that definitely learning experiences. My Julia read both of your books. She's 11 now, so she's probably just at the top end of the age group that they're written for. But we had some really good conversations about, oh, good, this book talks about mentorship. By the way, when we traveled to Knoxville for the weekend as a family, and I was quote unquote busy for the day, that was me being around my mentors and being around my coaches and expanding my sort of things. And oh, by the way, when we went to Florida, for a week as a family, and for part of it, I was, I had things that I was doing, again, talking about mentorship. So I love that you've taken that approach. So maybe if you can talk about the books just for a moment.
Sure. Yeah. The two books, we have two, we're actually coming out with a third sometime soon. But these two books, basically, it's, the first one, we really talk about responsibility, because a lot of times we hear a lot of phrases in our life. Oh, I had no choice. And I've heard that my whole life. Well, I had to do this. This is what I had to do. Hold on a second. No, you had a choice. And I think that's an important lesson to teach children. It's okay. So in the book, the first one, a gelato cannolis exploded. Something happens, a bad thing happens, and three characters choose three different paths to take. And it shows that, look, this pity party pig, he felt bad for himself. He made a lot of poor decisions after that. He bought TVs that he didn't have the money for, all that stuff. The responsible rhino, what does he do? He gets educated. He actually gets educated to find something different. Creative caterpillar does something even different. He gets creative and he tries something different. So it was just a book saying, hey, if something bad happens or if something happens, you have choices to make. And it's okay to sit back and say, okay, what are they? And that I kind of wrote it for adults, Bob, let's be honest, because a lot of us do this. Well, I have no choice. This is the only path I can take. And a lot of times we can sit back and say, wait a second, what are my choices? Because a lot of times we don't even know. I mean, we could choose to do nothing, or we could choose to do something. That is one choice. What are our choices? And that sometimes takes a lot of thought. And maybe it does, like into the second book, we have a mentor moose. Maybe it takes a mentor. Who are we talking to? Who are we getting influenced by? The people that are around us, and we teach our children this all the time, are the ones that are influence us. So who are the people in our lives that are creating impact? That's a big deal. And that's in the second book. It's like, okay, who's influencing you? Who's holding you back? Let's take a look at your friends. Let's see who that is. Maybe that we have to do that as adults sometimes, like we were saying earlier, is who are we letting into our house and influencing us is really important. And sometimes it's time to say, okay, maybe you talk to your wife a little bit about it. Let's look at our friends. Let's look at our community that we're with. And so that's what the books are about, because it's never too late to talk about this, especially with our children or our family. And there's always time to make improvement. I mean, I'm doing it all the time. Sometimes we forget and we're like, oh, that's right, I have a choice. What are they?
Yeah.
So they've been great. The books have been great for just conversational starters with families to have that conversation, just like you had with your daughter. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I love the topics. So I want to be mindful of our time. I really appreciate that you've taken the time out to be with us today. And I just want to transition over to the final questions. And so for you, Julia, what is your definition of success?
Well, that's a big word. I have to tell you, I hear a lot of people talk about it in the financial world, in the business world, and it's always, getting to the top and making more money. That's what I always assumed it was. But for me, I think becoming aware of my thoughts, becoming that personal development, becoming aware of where I am, my value, my worth. I know that sounds so simple, but that's a big deal, and actually doing something about it. Because a lot of times we think, okay, I want to get that done. I want to start paying attention to little things. I want to start, the personal development type thing. And we just leave it there. So to actually take a step and do it and actually notice those little things about ourselves, because they're really hard. It's easy to fix other people, but when it comes down to ourselves, it's probably the hardest. So I think once you get there, I feel like to me, that's success.
Great. So second question, for someone who's new to sort of learning to focus on their goals. So I'm editing this question a little bit. It says for someone who's new to investing, but we're not here. But also someone who's learning to focus on their goals and their path to success. Can you give a good book recommendation?
Okay, so like we talked about, my husband is the ultimate book reader, and we make fun of him because there's always an Amazon box coming. We're all excited, and it's a book for him. So kids are always disappointed. It's not like a fun toy. I actually do like podcasts, and like we were talking about, I'm all about the religious side of everything. So Bible in a Year podcast to me was life-changing. Now I'm doing Catechism in a Year. And I am reading the books as we go, because to me, faith is so important. And a lot of times we put that on hold to, work on everything else. So I'm going to just combine it with podcasts.
That's great. That's a great answer. And we spoke about that a little bit before we started recording here, but my mom will probably listen. She'll be the one. But I was going to recommend those to her. So now you just did for me.
I did.
Great. So before we get to the final question, again, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been a true pleasure for me. I really appreciate your openness and honesty about sort of, your that we all sort of struggle through things and how do we work them out. And I appreciate that from you. How can we support you, and how can people reach out to you if they were interested?
Sure. You can always email me at juliabarbaro@gmail.com. You can see me and Gino at juliaandgino.com. You can check out our podcast is on there as well, or check out the jakeandgino.com website. And our podcast is through there as well.
Mm-hmm. And your podcast is called?
Julia and Gino Show.
Julia and Gino, yes.
Yes, a lot of Julia and Gino.
Yes. And it's great. It's great. I really enjoy the podcast. It's fun to watch you feed off of each other, and respond to each other.
Thank you.
So final question, if you can think back with me to a young Julia around ages 10 to 12 years old, sort of knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to that young Julia, or really any pre-teenage child, to help guide them?
Wow, that is so, it's not that it's painful, but I just think back to my old self, and I'm just such a different person, and it's amazing. So thank you for this question. I would definitely tell my younger self, that you are unique. You are made very uniquely, just like everyone else, and you do have a mission in life. Um, to don't compare yourself with other people, because, like I said, everyone has something to offer, and don't look at other people as look at them as influences instead of trying to compete with them.
Hmm.
To have confidence and just take a step, even if you're afraid.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Julia. I
Yes.
really appreciate you coming on. Check her out. I'll have all of the links and in the bio section. If you enjoyed this show, please give a positive review and make sure you go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.